You check your 401k balance on a random Tuesday night, same routine as always, log in, squint at the number, feel that familiar mix of hope and dread. But tonight, something's different. You notice the balance went up more this month than you actually contributed from your paycheck. You stare at it for a second, thinking you did the math wrong. You didn't. Your money made more money than you did. And you have no idea what that means, or if it's a fluke, or if ever going to happen again. Here's the thing. Nobody explains to you. When you open your first retirement account, there's a specific number where your portfolio stops being something you build and starts being something that builds. You financial people call it the crossover point. Most Americans never hear those two words in their entire working life. And here is what I eventually figured out. I'm not a financial advisor. I don't team manage money. For a living, I am manage money. Just someone who spent most of my 20s thinking retirement accounts were a scam designed to confuse regular people, because honestly, that's exactly how they were explained to us. I opened my first 401k at 26 because HR told me to. I picked a fund because it had a nice name. I didn't check it again for 4 years. Somewhere in there, I stumbled onto this idea of the crossover point, and it rewired how I think about money complete. Through it, not the textbook version, the real version with real numbers and two people who show you exactly what this looks like in an actual American life. Both 32 years old. Both live in Ohio. Both make around $58,000 a year, working steady, unglamorous jobs. Dana works in hospital administration. Mike works in logistics. Same income, same zip code, same starting line. Dana starts putting 12% of her paycheck into her paycheck. 401k the year. She turns 32. Her company matches part of it. She barely notices the money is gone. Mike means to start investing. He really does. But there's always something: a car repair, a wedding, credit card debt from his 20s. That keeps creeping back up. He tells himself he'll start once things settle down. Things never quite settle down. Same age, same income, completely different rooms. They were going to end up and keep them in your head. We were coming back to both of them here. It's the fear most people carry around quietly, the feeling that they read behind that everyone else has this figured out, except them. According to Vanguard Ace research on retirement savers, the median 401k balance people in their 30s is a fraction of what financial planners recommend for that age group. Most people are not ahead. Most people are exactly where Mike is. So let's remove that fear. First, being behind is normal, permanent. What actually changes everything isn't your starting point, is whether you understand the mechanics of what is happening inside that account. Picture a snowball at the top of a hill. In the beginning, that snowball is small. You push it, you do all the work, it barely picks up any snow on its own. That's you in your 20s and early 30s, contributing paycheck after paycheck, watching the balance creep up slowly, wondering if any of this is doing anything. But here's what you can see from the top of the hill. That snowball is picking up mass the whole time, slowly, quietly. And at some point, the hill gets steep enough that the snowball starts moving on its own weight. You stop pushing it uphill. It starts rolling itself downhill. That's the crossover point, the moment your investment returns in a given year become larger than the amount of money you personally put in that year. Let's get specific about when this actually happens, because vague financial concepts don't help anyone. The crossover point depends on your contribution rate and your account's growth rate. But for a lot of steady middle income savers investing consistently in a diversified 401k or Roth IRA, this shift tends to show up somewhere in the 10 to 15-year mark of consistent investing, assuming a long-term average return in the 7% range, which is roughly what U.S. markets have historically delivered over multi-decade periods. After inflation adjustments vary, that's not to promise markets don't move in a straight line. Some years the snowball melts a little, but over long stretches, the pattern holds here, statin holds here. Why this matters emotionally, not just mathematically. In the early years, saving for retirement feels like sacrifice. You are giving up your money and getting almost nothing visible in return. That's the hardest phase, and it's exactly the phase where most people quit. Dana didn't quit. She kept contributing through years where the market dropped and her balance actually went backward. She kept going through a year when her statement showed a loss, and she genuinely Considered stopping Mike, meanwhile, kept waiting for the right time to start, not realizing that every year he waited was a neutral decision. It was an active decision to delay his own crossover point by a full year, maybe more now. Let's talk about what happens on the other side of that hill, because this is the part almost nobody shows you. Once you cross that point, the psychology of investing flips completely. You stop feeling like you were feeding a machine that gives nothing back. You start watching the machine feed itself. This is where Social Security, Medicare planning, and Roth IRA conversions start to matter, because once your portfolio is generating serious momentum on its own, your decisions shift from how do I build this to how do I protect and optimize this people near or past the crossover point. Start asking different questions. Should some of this go into a Roth IRA for tax-free growth later? How does this interact with future Social Security benefits? What happens to healthcare costs once Medicare kicks in at 65? And how does my portfolio need to support the gap years before that? These aren't questions for someone just starting out. They weigh questions for someone whose snowball has started rolling on its own. That's the tease for later in your own journey. But first, let's watch the numbers do what I'm describing. Let's walk through Dana Ace account year by year, using realistic numbers for someone earning around $58,000 a year and contributing 12% with a partial employer match invested in a simple diversified portfolio year. One Dana contributes roughly $70. Between her own money and her employer match, her account grows by about $300 from investment returns. Read that again, $300. Her contributions completely dwarf her growth. This is the pushing the snowball uphill phase. Year 5, Dana S. Total balance is around $42,000 that year. Her contributions add roughly $7,500. Her investment growth adds around $2,600. Growth is catching up, but contributions still lead year 10. Dana's balance has grown to approximately $108,000. Her contributions that year at about $80. Her investment growth that same year adds close to $7,200. They were nearly even. The snowball is about to crest the hill. Year 12. Dana S. balance crosses roughly $135,000. Her contributions add about $8,300. Her investment growth that single year adds nearly $90. Let that sink in. For the first time, her money made more money in 1 year than she personally contributed from her paycheck. That's the crossover point. Year 12, age 44. Dana's balance is around $340,000. Her annual growth alone, in a good year, is now larger than her entire yearly salary contribution used to be back in year 1. Think about that for a moment. The version of Dana who almost quit contributing during a bad market year had no idea she was 12 years away from her money, working harder. That does now picture Mike starts 8 years later than Dana at 40 instead of 32, contributing the same percentage. Once he finally gets serious, his crossover point doesn't happen. It happened at year 12. It happens closer to year 16 or 7. Because he's starting with less time for the snowball to gather size before the hill gets steep. Same income, same effort. Once he starts 8 lost years, pushed his entire timeline back by nearly as many years on the other end. According to research from the Employee Benefit Research Institute, a delay of even 5 to 10 years in starting consistent retirement contributions can reduce a worker's final retirement balance by well over 30%, even when contribution rates are identical. Once they begin 8 years, doesn't he just cost Mike 8 years? It costs him compounding. He can never get back here. So what nobody talks about, most financial content tells you the crossover point is only about numbers. Contribute more, invest longer, hit your number. But the real uncomfortable truth is this. The crossover point isn't primarily a math problem. It's a psychology problem. The hardest years of investing are the years before you can see any proof that it's working. That is exactly when most people stop. Not because they ran out of money, because they ran out of belief. Wall Street doesn't advertise this part because it's not exciting. There's no headline. And keep doing the boring thing for 12 years before you feel anything but that boring, invisible middle stretch is the entire game. The people who reach their crossover point guarantee the people who found some secret stock or perfect timing. They were the people who kept pushing the snowball up the hill during the years it looked like nothing was happening. But how do you actually survive this phase? The years where you were contributing and the account barely seems to move. I think the honest answer is that you need something to hold on to, besides the number itself, because the number won't reward you for a while. First, stop checking your balance every week. Checking daily or weekly during the early years just shows you noise market swings that mean nothing over a 20 or 30-year horizon. Check quarterly. Your nervous system will thank you. Second, automate everything you can damn. Never had to rely on willpower because her contribution came out before she ever saw the money. Willpower runs out, automation doesn't. Third, find one number that isn't to your balance to track. Instead, track your savings rate, track your savings contribution streak month after month without missing one. That number moves every single time you get paid, and it's something you fully control. Unlike the market, the people who make it to their crossover point aren't more disciplined than everyone else. In some abstract way, they just built a system that didn't require them to feel motivated on the hard days. There. So fourth thing that helped Dana specifically, and it might sound small, but it wasn't tea. She kept a note on her phone with one sentence: the account down today is the same account that will be up in 10 years. She didn't try to sound inspirational. Forgot that downturns are temporary and recoveries are historically the norm, not the exception for diversified U.S. portfolios held over long periods. Mike's turning point, when it finally came, wasn't a windfall or a raise. It was conversation with a coworker who casually mentioned checking his own 401k statement. Mike realized he'd gone almost 2 years without opening the app at all, not out of discipline, but out of avoidance. Avoidance feels like nothing is happening. In reality, every month of avoidance was a month. The snowball never got pushed. If you take one thing from the survival section, let it be this: the emotional work of investing is front-loaded. The first decade asks the dirt. Most of you gives back the least every year after that. The ratio flips in your favor if you were in your 30s or early 40s. Your job right now is simple. Get the snowball moving down the hill as early as possible, even if the amount feels small. The $200 a month you start at 32 is worth dramatically more than the $400 a month you start at 42, because time, not amount, is the real engine here. Your mindset shift this decade isn't about the balance. As of starting the clock, if you're in your 50s, your job is different. You are likely close to or approaching your own crossover point, and this is the decade to get serious about catch-up contributions, which the IRS allows for both 401ks and IRAs. Once you hit 50, your mindset shifted. It's not too late to accelerate the snowball, even if you can go back and start it earlier. If you're in your 60s, or a late starter, I want to be honest with you. Instead of falsely comforting, your version of the crossover point might look different. It might involve working a few years longer, or leaning more heavily on Social Security, timing decisions, or downsizing to free up capital. Your mindset shift. The goal isn't to recreate Dana's 30-year timeline. It's to build the strongest version of your own hill, starting from exactly where you are with the years you actually have left here. It's what I keep coming back to. Nobody feels the crossover point happen in real time. There's no alert on your phone, no confetti in your 401k app. You just wake up one day, check your balance, and realize the number moved by more than your paycheck did. Somewhere between the paycheck version of you pushing that snowball uphill and the version of you watching it roll on its own, a quiet shift happened. You didn't get lucky. You just kept showing up during the years. Nobody was watching. That's the part worth remembering. The next time your balance goes down for a month, it's not pointless. It's just early if you want to actually see where your own crossover point might land based on your age, income, and contribution. Rate that a video I can walk you through next. For now, just keep pushing the snowball. It's picking up more than you think.